So what you need to know about raising monarch butterflies, and this is raising them from eggs. So you can buy caterpillars, but you don't need to. It's actually really easy to do it from eggs. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Okay, so you guys are probably already sold on this idea, but in case you were wondering why should we help monarchs? Well, mostly because the population has declined about 80% in the past 20 years. The figures are really kind of dramatic. The population is such now that one early winter storm during their migration could take them out, and it would be really, really hard to get them back from that. So it's pretty delicate right now. Of course, they're pollinators, just like honeybees. And the interesting thing that isn't in the wild, less than 10% of eggs that are laid will survive to actually become adult monarch butterflies. However, on the flip side, most people who raise them have a greater than 90% survival rate. So you really can make a really big impact because they're not difficult to raise. So we're going to go over the basics of the monarch lifestyle and life cycle. They're wild partiers. The life cycle, and then we'll go into each life stage a little bit more detail. So they have 5 stages of growth called instars, and those are marked by molts. So they will molt their skin, and this is something that I've actually seen happen. It's really cool. And before they do it, the caterpillar will stop eating for 24 to 48 hours, and they might even just kind of be sitting at the bottom of their enclosure and not moving around much. This is the one time where they don't eat, because otherwise they're just eating machines. But you want to make sure not to mess with them during this time, because just like snakes and tarantulas and other animals that molt, when they are preparing to molt, they can be very fragile. So if your caterpillar suddenly stops eating and it's not moving around much, don't mess with them and just wait. As far as the egg stage, when they're just tiny babies, they're in the egg for just 3 to 4 days, really not very long. And then 10 days to 2 weeks as a caterpillar, and 10 days to 2 weeks in chrysalis. And then they come out of the chrysalis as a butterfly. So milkweed is the only food that they eat. In Minnesota, we have 6 different types, and some of those have flowers that the adult butterflies will drink from as well. So those are doing double duty. The only ones that I have on my property, I have common milkweed and butterfly weed. Butterfly weed has, I don't know if you've seen it, it's just got long skinny leaves, and it's got bright orange flowers on it. And I actually tried to feed my monarch caterpillars the leaves from the butterfly weed, because in theory they should like those, because it's still milkweed, and they wanted nothing to do with it. So I don't know if I just had picky. Yeah, Laurel.
So what I can tell you is that they will only eat the type of milkweed that the egg was laid on.
Okay, and that makes sense.
Tasted. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, because all of the eggs I found have been on common milkweed. So yeah, they were like, yeah, no, I don't want that. So I just continued feeding them the common milkweed, and they were happy with that.
I have a pink flowered butterfly weed, and
okay.
And they definitely lay eggs on that. And yeah, from experience, when I feed them, I have to keep the ones that are on the butterfly weed separate from my ones that are on the milkweed, because
that's
they
fascinating.
Eat differently.
Yeah, wow, they have very specific taste. That's really cool.
Yes.
What's that?
Picky.
Yes, thank you for resolving that mystery for me. So yeah, so I guess it'll depend where you're finding your eggs, but these are all the different options that we have here in Minnesota. So the eggs look like this. They're very, very easy to identify. They're visible to the naked eye, and to me they look like a football that's lodged in the bottom of the egg on one end, and then they have these really distinct ridges. You can't see the ridges necessarily with the naked eye, but if you have a magnifying glass, it's super obvious. The female just lays 1 egg per leaf on the underside of the milkweed plant. And so she's she's making it so that if they don't usually lay more than one egg next to each other, because although I've never seen it happen, apparently the baby caterpillar can cannibalize, and like if its brother hasn't hatched yet, it might eat that egg. So she just does one per leaf. So like I said, super obvious. And I get really obsessed with looking for them. Once I know the monarchs are around, I'm just like checking the bottoms of milkweed leaves everywhere. And like I said, on this last bullet point, once you start looking, it can be really hard to stop. So the brand new baby caterpillars are super cute. They have this black head, no stripes on them yet, just totally cream colored and naked. You can see his little egg casing next to him and the little hole that he chewed out. So he chews his way out of there after 3 to 4 days, and then he will eat the egg. And again, this is something that's easy to see. I check on my caterpillars, a couple times a day, and I've seen this a few times, and it's really fun to watch. And then they just eat and poop and grow. So they will increase their mass by 2,000 times over 10 to 14 days. So on the left is a caterpillar that's, the one on top is probably in the 4th instar. So he's not even as big as he's gonna get. And the one below him might be in the second probably. So even just marked by 2 molts, that's a size difference right there. It's probably like twice as big as the little guy. Apparently, and I haven't experienced this because I pluck leaves and stems, and I don't have like an entire potted milkweed plant that I bring inside for my caterpillars, but 1 to 2 caterpillars can eat an entire milkweed plant in 2 weeks. So it is important to have an available source of pesticide-free milkweed. And then on the right, that's what their poop looks like. And it's super easy to clean up because while it's soft when it comes out of them, it hardens up pretty quickly. It's just little hard pellets. It doesn't smell like anything because it's 100% milkweed, so it's not gross. And then after that 5th molt, they go into their chrysalis. So the caterpillar, the 5th instar caterpillar, will do what I call a walkabout. So they're in my butterfly tent and they stop eating, and he's just like doing laps around the tent over and over and over and over again. And he's looking for a suitable place to do this that you see in the photo on the right. They go into what's called a J hang, and they have silk spinnerets like a spider, and they will sew a little silk button on the top of the mesh tent. And then they will just stick their butt on that silk button, and it's really, really strong. And they'll just hang from that, and they turn into this J form, and they hang in J formation for about 18 hours, and then they will form a chrysalis. Have you guys seen a monarch go into a chrysalis before? No? Okay, so we can watch this video. It's pretty cool. It's both terrifying and really cool at the same time. So you can see this when you they're getting close to going into chrysalis when you see this black line down the side. This is.
So I'm not seeing the video.
Oh, sorry. Hang on.
Yeah.
Now, can you see it?
There, now I can see it.
Okay, perfect. So see this black line down the side? That's the caterpillar's spiracles, and it's like a breathing tube that goes down the side of the caterpillar. And that will start to withdraw. They're pulling that up and out. And so that's when you know they're getting close to turning into the chrysalis. And they're just gyrating and twitching, and they just look like they're going through hell. It's really cool, but it's also really terrifying. And then you can see right here, his skin is splitting up the back, and that green grub thing is like emerging, but the skin is splitting all the way up, and it keeps going up, and that's the chrysalis coming out. So like I used to think that, the caterpillar was inside this thing. Well, the caterpillar is completely gone. It doesn't exist anymore. And that skin splits. You can see the antennas are getting further and further apart as this thing emerges. And that green casing is just, it's got a fluid inside and there's nothing else to it. It's bizarre to me how this green sausage casing, essentially filled with liquid, then turns into a butterfly. Like all the genetic material is in there and to become a butterfly, and that's what happens. And so the skin just keeps splitting and splitting and working its way up towards the top. And this little black thing up at the top, this becomes important later. It's called a cremaster, and that's what the butterfly or the chrysalis is hanging from. It's like a little stem, and it's attached to that silk button that I was talking about. And it's really, really strong. Unless your butterfly has a disease or a problem, this should always hang tight, even though it's gyrating and wriggling and really seems like it should fall down at any second. So the skin keeps working its way up, working its way up. And then when it gets to the very top, that's when the real show begins. And this chrysalis just starts gyrating to break free of that skin, and the skin will just fall down on the bottom of your mesh in this crumpled mess. So now he's really going to start wriggling to get rid of that. There's the cremaster attached to the silk. It's like, I have to get rid of this skin. It's really funny to watch it in person because they really do go nuts. And then it falls off. And I can go forward a little bit here. It takes a little while, but this yellowish green thing will harden. And then that's what it looks like ultimately. So the chrysalis is actually very fragile then. For about 48 hours, it's still soft. And if it were to fall or get touched or squished during that time, your butterfly's toast. But after about 48 hours, it's hard. And like Laura was saying, then you can move it to another location. And Martha, you said you moved your painted lady once. Yeah, so you have some experience with that, and we'll talk about that too. So on the left is the jade green chrysalis. And this is what it looks like about 24 hours before the butterfly is going to come out. It's super obvious. It's like, oh, I can just see the butterfly in there, and it means their arrival is imminent. Oops, sorry. I think my YouTube kept going. Hang on. Let's just get out of YouTube, shall we? There we go. Okay. And then this middle photograph has butterflies that have just emerged and butterflies that have been out for a while. So these two guys here, you can see how fat their little abdomen is, and their wings are all crumpled. They expel a reddish fluid. It's actually called meconium, just like in people and other animals. And then their wrinkled wings will straighten out as they pump fluid into them. And then after 3 to 6 hours or so, those wings harden, and then you can release them. I've been told that if the weather is stormy or cold, then go ahead and keep them overnight, and you don't have to feed them or anything if it's just overnight. But if it's a nice day, you can release them the same day. And then here's one of the butterflies I released. I don't have a lot of nectar flowers in my yard, but there's a woman who lives a block away that I found on Nextdoor who has literally a butterfly paradise. She's won pollinator awards for her garden. And so I released all my butterflies last year in her garden, and she must have had, I mean, I released 30, and then she had plenty of her own. So on any given day, there's probably like 60 butterflies in her yard. Her neighbors would come by just to see the butterflies. It was amazing. Okay, so getting started, what do you need? Well, you don't need a lot, especially at the beginning. Egg stage through the first instar, which is little tiny guys, I use these little sandwich Ziploc containers with a secure lid, because if they get out, you won't find them. They're so tiny. And so, like I said, the monarch lays 1 egg on the bottom of the leaf So you can either put the entire leaf in the container, or if you have a whole bunch of them, you can just cut a square around the egg and put sections laid out like on a grid in one of these containers. And you don't want them overlapping because of the aforementioned potential of cannibalism. But if they're just separated by a ½ inch or an inch, they'll be fine. They're not going to go roaming off of their little square. You can rinse them with the egg under the faucet gently before you put them in there. And then you can put them on a dry paper towel in the container, and then that will keep the humidity pretty decent. But once a day, you can also mist them. And you just do that by, you've got your container and you squirt the bottle straight up in the air so the mist rains down. Because if you spray and you've got baby caterpillars in there, they're just going to go flying off into space. So you don't mist the caterpillars directly. And then as they get bigger, you want to move them into more of a tent sort of a situation. And again, you need a regular source of pesticide-free milkweed because they're going to be eating a lot. The mesh tent has better air circulation, but it means that you will need to continue misting them. They don't really need the moisture to drink because they get the liquid that they need from the milkweed. And as long as the milkweed isn't wilted, they'll do fine. But misting helps with molting. If they get too crunchy and dry, they might have trouble shedding all the skin that they need to shed because they go through a lot of molts. So the way that I do this is I get floral tubes with rubber caps, and I literally just went to a local florist and told them I was raising monarchs, and they gave me a whole bunch because they were really excited about that. So I'm sure any florist around you guys would do the same. And that prevents accidental drownings. I did lose a caterpillar to drowning last year, and I was really devastated. So you want to make sure that you don't have any open water at all, even the tiniest, like not a millimeter, but a centimeter, ½ centimeter of water. A caterpillar can drown in that. So you don't want that. You can also put an entire pot of milkweed in a tent if you want, but it's a lot harder to keep clean because again, they're pooping and pooping and pooping, and that's falling in the dirt. And if there's too much exposure to that level of bacteria, then your caterpillars can get sick. And then as they get bigger, once they're ready to turn into a chrysalis, then for sure they need to be in a tent. I mean, in theory, you can raise them up to that point in a plastic container of some kind, and that's fine. But once they want to be a chrysalis, they're going to want to walk and walk and walk and feel like they've made some progress finding their perfect spot. And B, when they eclose from that chrysalis, there needs to be enough space around them so that they can do that without touching anything with their wings. Otherwise, they're going to be crippled. So you can't have them come out in a jar, or their edges of their wings are going to be folded over permanently, and then you'll have a pet butterfly. They also can't come out over caterpillars who are eating milkweed, and I'll go into why that is in just a minute. It's a disease prevention thing as well. But as we were talking about, you can move your chrysalids to a butterfly and chrysalis only tent, which is what I do. I have one for caterpillars, and then once they crawl up to the top and they form their chrysalis, then I move them to a tent that's just for chrysalises after 48 hours. And so this is what my chrysalises look like prior to being moved. I pulled them down. They have the little silk button, and you loosen that with a pin. And then you take a piece of dental floss and you tie it around the cremaster, and that silk helps keep it on too. And then I just tie it in a loop, and then slip a safety pin through the loop and pin it to the top of the mesh tent. And they do real well. So here's a picture of the butterfly after it emerged, and here's my little safety pin right there. So do you have to have 2 tents? Not if you only hatch one batch of butterflies all a similar age at a time. So if they all go into chrysalis at the same time and you don't have butterflies or you don't have caterpillars feeding underneath, you don't have to worry about it. And you can just go through one cycle at a time. I, however, was collecting eggs, like I said, all the time because I was kind of obsessed. So I always had various stages of caterpillars and butterflies. And so I needed 2 tents. Okay, so let's talk about milkweed for a second. You can find it by the sides of the highway. I feel like in Minnesota, we're pretty good about not spraying pesticides on milkweed. I think MnDOT or whoever's planting it is planting it there for a reason. So you can find it there. Also businesses and neighbors who have native gardens. Again, next door is a really good place to go and just be like, hey, I'm raising monarchs and I don't have enough milkweed. Can anybody clue me in? And you'll find people that way who are excited to help. You can pluck leaves daily if you have it in your yard. That's kind of what I do. I have like 6 to 8 plants out in my native prairie garden, and I just go out and pluck some every day. Or you can pluck it if it's not on your own property and it's kind of a chore. You can go out and pluck a whole bunch of leaves and rinse them and then put them in a plastic bag and they'll keep in the refrigerator. You can do stem cuttings as well. And I do this too once my caterpillars are big. So you have to cut off with common milkweed. It needs a lot of water and it wilts really easily. So what I do is I cut the stem, and then when I get home, I'll cut vertically up the stem and do little nicks along the sides of it on the parts that are going to be in the floral tube. But before I even put it in the tent, I will submerge it in a pitcher of water for a few hours, really, really cold water. And that tends to make it last for several days. And then I'll put it in the floral tube and then check the floral tubes several times, well, not several times a day, several times a week, to make sure that it doesn't run dry. And again, you can do a potted plant, but it is harder to keep them clean. And there's more of a chance that, especially if your potted plant was previously outside, that there might be some predators on the plant that you then bring into your tent. So that's not something you want to do either. Milkweed sap can damage your eyes if exposed to it, so make sure to wash your hands after handling your milkweed. So where do you find eggs? So interestingly enough, female butterflies like lone stands of milkweed. So for instance, given the opportunity to lay eggs on a field full of milkweed and a random potted milkweed plant, she'll choose the potted plant. The reason being, and this is fascinating to me, but the butterfly is smart enough to understand that the field of milkweed will have more predators looking for her eggs than a random potted plant, which she's like, well, what is the chance of the stink bug coming to that potted plant? It's much lower. So, so they're pretty smart that way. And actually, I had a potted milkweed plant that I got from Home Depot, and I just set it out in my yard next to my, I had a big planter that had a bunch of nectar producing flowers in it. And I just set it out there, and it kind of looked rough, and I don't know what I was going to do with it, probably try to put it in the ground. And one day I'm out there and I'm just watering everything, and I pick up the plant and I almost dropped it because there was a caterpillar on it, and it was in like 3rd instar, like good size caterpillar. So some monarch came along and saw this raggedy ass plant, laid her egg on it, and I'm just like, he would have eaten that entire plant and then had to go roaming like 60 feet to go find more. But she was like, hey, this is great, no predators, and picked it right out. So and I know that I'm a member of a monarch Facebook group, and that's not uncommon. People are like, they love the potted plants. So if you grab some potted milkweed plants, if you don't have any other access, you will get eggs this way. It's kind of funny the way they're really attracted to that. And then wherever you see a few random milkweed plants. So behind the clinic, the Oakdale hospital, by the water tower, there's some random plants there on the corner. I found eggs there. Like I said, I have like 6 plants, and I've found tons of eggs on mine. You just have to look for them. They also they seem to prefer the lowest leaves of the milkweed plant. And I don't know if that's a predator thing or not, but that's why it's important to check all the leaves, and why you'll get obsessed with checking all the leaves. Okay, so I'll go through some of the potential problems that can arise. This isn't to scare you away, but just to be aware. And I'll tell you which ones I've actually experienced. So I've experienced this one. Apparently there's this type of wasp in Minnesota, and it can parasitize your eggs. So on the left is a normal looking egg, and you can see that black circle is that caterpillar's head that we saw in that first photo. But on the right is one where a wasp has parasitized it. And if we didn't if we allowed that to come to fruition, about 10 wasps would come out of that egg eventually. So exactly, it's disgusting. So you want to squish anything that looks like that. Give it its 3 to 4 days. And if it hasn't come out and then it has this mottled black appearance, just squish it in a paper towel and throw it away. And I did have this happen to one egg. It's not common, but it does happen. This is something that happened to me last summer. One of my butterflies got this protozoan parasite. I'm going to call it OE because that's a really long thing to pronounce there. So this is a parasite that only lives in the gut of monarch butterflies. And we are fortunate in Minnesota because, probably due to winter, only about 10% of our monarch population is affected with this. Whereas if we were trying to raise them in Florida, it's more like 60%. So I can't imagine how challenging that would be. So this protozoan parasite, it goes through the entire life cycle. So the female, if she has it and she lives to lay eggs, it will be on the egg casing when she lays her egg. And then the caterpillar comes out and he's fine, but of course then he eats the egg casing and then he has it in his gut. So this is why we rinse the eggs off. And in places like Florida, where this is really, really common, they will actually bleach the eggs and bleach the milkweed before they give it to their caterpillars, just to make sure that that parasite is killed. So that is also an option you can find online. It's just a diluted bleach solution. I don't do it as a rule. I guess if I have more butterflies that get this year, I might consider it. But last year I only had one. This is also the reason that we can't let butterflies emerge from their chrysalids over the caterpillars, because if you get one that actually makes it to eclosing, which I did, and mine looked perfectly healthy, he was gorgeous, and then he couldn't fly. But what happens is they come out, and then if you imagine these little, so this, what we're looking at here, these black things are the scales from their wings, and that's normal. Or this is from his body, that's why it's black. The scales on their wings are usually orange. And then all of these little seed-like things are the spores from the parasite. And so these will come off of the butterfly's abdomen and wings and just sprinkle down like glitter all over everything. And then your caterpillars who are eating their milkweed are then eating these spores, and then they're getting it too. So that's why it's important to keep them separate. And then apparently it can come out in their poop as well and be spread that way if they're traipsing through it. So we have to regularly clean out the poop. What you can do to make that easier is those plastic trays that you put under plants, just 99 cents a piece. You can put a plant tray under your milkweed container, and then all the poop falls in there because they're just on your milkweed, all the caterpillars, and then just toss that out a couple times a day. Or if you have lots and lots of caterpillars, I used a keyboard vacuum from Amazon last year. It's like 20 bucks. And like I said, those are hard little pellets, and you just suck them up several times a day, and it keeps your tent nice and clean. And then if you're just doing one batch of butterflies at a time, you can just clean out the entire enclosure with soap and water between batches. At the end of the season, I bleach the whole enclosure when I'm all done for the year. And then you can test the adult butterflies for OE. And that's how I got this slide here, is my crippled butterfly. He couldn't fly. And I was like, this is probably what's happening here. I'm going to need to euthanize him anyway. So I'm going to use him for a learning experience. And I'm going to see if I can test him. There's this guy on YouTube, Mr. Lund Science is his name, and he's awesome. And he has a very detailed video on how to test them, but you're basically just holding the butterfly in one hand. You're using one of your middle finger to keep their little legs out of the way. And then you're tapping a piece of tape that's around your finger with the sticky side out on their abdomen, and collecting these scales, and then putting that on a slide and looking at it under the microscope. It actually ended up being a lot easier than I thought. I was terrified that I'd get one of their little legs stuck on the tape. And then it's like, I don't want to rip off his leg. But it wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. And I learned a lot from the experience. And then to euthanize the butterfly, you just slide them in an envelope with their wings closed. So they can't move, they can't see, and you put them in the freezer, and they apparently go to sleep before they freeze. So it's humane. And yeah, so like I said, my experience with that was just one butterfly out of like 30. So you know, as long as it's less than 10%, you're on par with the population for Minnesota. I have not experienced this. I don't want to experience this. This is another parasite that's similar to Cuterebra. So these tea flies will lay eggs on the caterpillars and burrow into the caterpillar, and they eat it from the inside. And then the larva comes out, which you can see in this photo, and kills the caterpillar in the process.
I
So,
have had that.
Yeah. What was that?
I've had, and it's really gross because that, I don't know if that's actually a larva. So the larva is actually living inside from what I can figure out, because I lost so many caterpillars the one year because of this.
Yeah.
And the caterpillars seem to be fine, and all of a sudden they just don't eat well. They don't start eating well. I actually even had a few of them end up start to make their chrysalis.
Okay.
And all of a sudden what you'll see is the caterpillar will be like stuck on a sidewall, and it looks like it's got this green stringy goo hanging from it.
Yeah.
And down at the bottom of the cage would be those little oval things.
Right.
And so I put the oval things in a jar, and I put the lid on, and I screwed it up. And about 2 weeks later, there were all kinds of little flies. So I actually think those are like little pupa or, little.
Okay. Right.
The caterpillar lived inside the caterpillar, and then when it became a pupa, it emerged from it and made that pupa, and then it eventually morphed into a fly.
A fly, right.
And it was like, oh my God, because I couldn't figure out why I was having all these caterpillars dying. I would find these oval things, and I'm like, are those poop because they're sick, or what the heck is going on? And so I finally just, trial and error on my own, isolated it and figured it out.
Yeah, some people on the Facebook page will post, and people like, oh, that's tea fly. You got because like you said, the caterpillar will be doing okay, and then it just fails to thrive all of a sudden, or it turns dark, or it develops issues, and they're like, yeah, no, you got to get rid of that because something gross is going to come out. Bleh. So the way to prevent this is that the tea flies don't parasitize eggs. So if you are not bringing in caterpillars from the outside, you'll be okay. So you just have to be cautious with anything. Like when I found that caterpillar on the potted plants in my yard, it was like, well, shit, I'm gonna bring it inside, understanding that I need to watch it really carefully because it could already have been parasitized when I bring it in. So that's the way to prevent that. Okay, poisoned milkweed is another issue. This would be if it's been sprayed with pesticides, but you can try to bring the caterpillar back from this. So the way that is they actually vomit, and it's green. And then you rinse the caterpillar off under the faucet and put it on some safe milkweed, and they can recover from this. However, they can also get poisoned by flea and tick treatment. So again, on the Facebook page that I'm on, somebody said that they had treated their cat with Frontline, and then their cat went and rubbed on their mesh cage. So you want to make sure to keep any treated pets away from your tents, and wash your hands after applying something like Frontline to your pets. And then zippers. And I put this on here. I haven't ever zipped a caterpillar, but oh my gosh, they are attracted to the zipper part of the tent in a weird way, and even to build their chrysalis. Like they're like, hey, this looks awesome. I will build my chrysalis hanging from the zipper track, So the mesh tent, the resource for mesh tents that I provide at the end, they're nice. First of all, the flaps open out, so they're not opening from the bottom and having to hold this flap up every time you access. So they fall down, and there's 2 zippers. So if your caterpillar is on the zipper, you can still unzip it. And what they recommend is always have, instead of having both zippers all the way on one side, and then you have a caterpillar there and you can't open it, have them always halfway in the middle. So you can always access at least half, and that works like a charm. And then of course, once they go into chrysalis, if they're on your zipper, you can move them after 48 hours. But I have heard from on that Facebook page, people who've injured the caterpillar with a zipper, and that's just terrible, and don't want that to happen. And then of course, you know, heat can happen to any animal. I tend to move my caterpillar's tent outside. They don't need to experience, you know, the greater world, but I always think, you know, if they're raised in my house and I have air conditioning on, and then they don't experience like wind or sun or anything until they're a butterfly, that seems overwhelming to me. So I will move the whole tent outside, but I put them in the shade and where it's going to be shady all day long. Because if they're in direct sun and they can't get away from it, they will die. And then if it's windy, so the mesh cages can blow over really easily. And if you think about it, you have like a jar probably with your floral tubes and your milkweed in it. And if that blows over, there's the potential that somebody will get hurt by the jar or anything else that's in your cage. So if you take them outside, make sure to weight that tent down and make sure it's weighted evenly on all the sides so that it doesn't tip over and then your weight crushes somebody. It's just always something to worry about with caterpillars. And so it's just make sure that they don't blow away there. Drowning. So I did have this happen. Again, I had one of the little plastic pans under my something like this, a glass with you know, marbles in it or floral tubes in it. And it had the tiniest amount of water in there, and a caterpillar fell in there and he drowned. Now, what I didn't know at the time is apparently you can revive them. And I really wish I had tried that because I just threw them away. But for you guys, if you have a caterpillar, because they have this way that they breathe through their skin, and they have these spiracles that are like tubes. And if you dry that out, apparently they can be revived. So you take them out of the water, obviously, you kind of dry them off with a paper towel, and then you cover them with salt, which seems like it would be deadly, but it just dries them out. And then you wait. If they're going to come back, they'll start to move, and you just wait. And once it crawls all the way out of the salt, then you rinse it under the faucet for just a second to get the salt off of it and put it back on its milkweed. You can bring them back to life. So pretty cool.
I was wondering if you're going to say put them in rice.
I know. I thought that online that they would say that too, because it's like your cell phone, but apparently it's salt that does the trick.
Salt just seems caustic, but
I know. But they have a YouTube video even of this little caterpillar, and he's just like crawling his way out of the salt, and he's fine. So,
weird.
Yep. So don't try to use something like a laundry hamper for your tent. I have not tried to do this, but I know other people who have, and the little holes are just too big. And those little tiny caterpillars, when they're brand new, are so small. So it's best to use something that's made for butterflies, and know how many caterpillars you have per enclosure or per container, because sometimes you'll end up with an additional one. I had that happen. I brought in milkweed to feed caterpillars, and I apparently didn't check it closely enough because there was an egg on there. And one day I look and I have all these big, huge caterpillars and one little guy. It's like, where did you come from? So you can end up with additional. And for that reason, if you're disposing of milkweed, make sure to check it really carefully for either little tiny babies or eggs. And then, don't use either a butterfly tent or food storage containers or something with a secure lid, because we don't want to lose caterpillars. So let's talk about tagging for a minute. So tagging is designed for only for the butterflies that come that eclose in Minnesota. It's going to be early to late August. It's different depending on what zone you're in, but because those are the butterflies that are going to make that massive migration all the way to Mexico. They're what they call the super monarchs, and it's awesome because all summer long monarchs are living a few weeks. And then these monarchs that come out in early to late August and all the way up through middle to end of September, they live from when they were hatched all the way through the winter, and end up dying in the spring after they lay eggs. And then their generations are the ones that are making the migration back north. So right now, I know, well, it was a few weeks ago, but I know butterflies were in Texas and they're making their way north. And Laurel, do you know when they, like how early they get to Minnesota? Because last year was my first season and I didn't start until mid-July, I think.
I was gonna say, I usually don't see monarchs until the end of June.
Okay.
And boy, if I see any out here, it's usually like you see one and it's like days and days and days before you see another one.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, they must trickle up. And I guess I don't know. So the ones that are coming back in the spring, they're not making a whole trek from Mexico back
No.
up, are they? The ones in Mexico stop in Texas and lay some eggs, and those monarchs migrate further north. Right?
Exactly. It's like
Okay.
a relay race.
Yeah.
Exactly. They're tag teaming it.
Okay.
So Monarch Watch is the company that sells the tags, and they don't even start selling them until until like beginning of August. You can start purchasing them because they don't want people tagging monarchs that aren't even going to migrate.
Sure.
It's a citizen scientist project. It's really cool. And it's just to help better understand the migration and track the populations to try to kind of see how they're doing. About 25 tags cost $15, and it's easy to do. You just hold the butterfly by its wings, and it's like a little tiny fingernail sticker, and it's got this adhesive and it's super light so it doesn't interfere with their flight. And you stick it on their wing. You record the number on the tag, whether it's male or female, whether it was captive or wild caught, and where you raised it or caught it, because you can also just catch a wild monarch and tag it as well. And then you send this spreadsheet into Monarch Watch, and then they keep this database of monarchs. So it's really fun to contribute to that effort.
Do you ever get information back that like your monarch was?
Yeah, so in theory you can. I only tagged 5 monarchs because those were the only ones that that came out at that time of year. And I thought that they like notified you if they found it, but then I was on the Monarch Watch website, and there's actually this spreadsheet that you download, and it lists all the ones that were found. So I think what I need to do is go and cross-reference and search for my numbers. I don't think that they contact you. I think you have to look it up.
Okay.
Which makes sense, because that's a big amount of people they'd have to be contacting.
Yeah, when I'm banding owls, I know that if someone recaptures an owl that I have banded, I will get notification that it was recaptured and where it was captured, and what condition it was in and stuff like that. And same thing, if I capture one that's got a tag, a band on it, I record all the information and submit it so that whoever whoever originally banded it knows that that bird is still around.
That's really cool. Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I can see with the monarchs. I mean, there are millions of
those
as opposed to the lesser number of owls. So.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And then other things you can do to support monarchs. Obviously, you can plant milkweed, nectar producing flowers, because we want to support both ends of that life cycle. Donate to Monarch Watch. And then, of course, refusing to use pesticides in your garden or yard is a really good thing to do. So here's some resources, and I'll send you guys these slides. But if you don't want to raise them from an egg, Monarch Watch does sell monarch rearing kits, and I think they send you like a first instar caterpillar and then whatever you need for that. You probably still need to do your own milkweed though. This picture is of the keyboard vacuum for sucking up frass. That's really revolutionized my cleaning last year, made it really quick and easy. And then monarchbutterflylifecycle.com sells both butterfly tents and floral tubes, which, like I said, you probably don't need to purchase floral tubes. You can get them for free, but they do sell those if you don't have a florist that will give them to you. And then this YouTube channel is Mr. Lund Science, and he's got that video on how to test butterflies for OE. Or if you end up wanting to do that, I'm happy to help you with that as well. And then Monarch tagging information is at monarchwatch.org, and that's where you purchase the tags. I also purchased this PDF, and I would strongly recommend it. It's got much of the information I gave you, but it's kind of goes into greater depth. It's just called Bring Home the Butterflies, and it's a digital download by this guy, Tony Gomez, who's actually local. And he also runs a Facebook page for people who raise monarchs, and you can find that on Facebook really easily. And he's kind of a, I don't know, a butterfly guru who, like I said, is local and has raised hundreds and hundreds of butterflies and has had very little sickness. And that's why he wrote this PDF, was to teach other people how to have like a greater than, what does he say, raise more monarchs with less effort and at least a 90% survival rate. So if you want more information or really want to get into it, I'd recommend that. And it's like $10. It's not very expensive. And that's it. Do you guys have any questions? You're kind of, you've both done this. So, but if there's anything that needs clarification, I'm happy to answer questions.
So do you have a list of, could you get a list of like the top 10 nectar producing flowers that are preferred by monarchs?
Yeah, in fact, I have one on the desktop of my computer I can send you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would appreciate that too.
Absolutely. And you can also, there's this thing, it's kind of cool. You can become a registered monarch way station. And I can't remember who does it. I'll find out.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's Monarch Watch, but you fill out this information and it will tell you, it'll be like, okay, you have to have at least 5 of these plants in your yard, and it lists the plants that are favored by monarchs. And then you need to have do you clear out the underbrush around the plants every year? And do you have, it just walks through all the things that monarchs like. And if you provide all those things, they'll send you a little sign that you can post on your yard. And it's like, I am Monarch Way Station number 10,413, or whatever. It's really cool.
That's so funny.
Yeah. So yeah, that has, that website has a lot of information on the flowers too, but yeah, I can absolutely send that to you because there's lots and lots of options.
When you find the eggs and you put them in the little sandwich containers, do you have to put holes in there or anything?
No, in fact, you don't want to, because they're so little.
They're so little.
Yeah. Not that, I mean, honestly, it's kind of funny because they're pretty much limited to their 2 square inches of milkweed leaf, and they're not going to go venturing away. But on the off chance that they could crawl out through one of those holes.
Right.
So yeah, they don't need air that way. They'll do just fine without poking holes in the lid.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Anything else?
I don't think so. That was really good though. Lots of good information. So
awesome. I think what I would like to do is, once we know the monarchs are back, I think it would be fun to get together anybody who's interested, and we'll try to go find eggs, because there's several spots around the Oakdale Hospital. So there's behind the building by the water tower, like I talked about, and then there's a bunch of milkweed over off of the movie parking lot. And then also, if you go up Heron Lane, there's Helmo and there's Heron. Isn't it Heron? I think it is.
Yeah.
The one that goes past the library and the school back there. There's milkweed all along that road. So I think we can find at least 1 or 2 eggs for everybody to get started at the beginning of the season. So that would be fun.